Cleveland Browns, okay, did their thing.
Yeah, I did.
And Joe Flacco is an absolute beast. Adam Schefter, I think I just heard, is reporting that he has reverted back to the Browns practice squad, and at the same, he also is now eligible to sign with another team's active roster despite any interest Flacco wants to remain in Cleveland. And I believe Stefanski said yesterday that Joe Flacco is the starter for the rest of the year. So after throwing for 300 yards and multiple touchdowns, looking like Super Bowl Joe Flacco, $100 million contract Joe Flacco, with the team that they have, with a great run game, a good offensive line, some weapons, and a defense. And Njoku is just full on, how you doing? I'm here with Joe Flacco. It made sense that maybe the Browns are still going to be in this thing. Maybe with that defense, maybe with the weapons they have. And D-Hop, their kicker, hits a 55-yarder with like a minute something left to put him up 10. Like, he's a stud. It's like, maybe Joe Flacco goes on another run. And then with the energy and emotion and what Joe Stefanski said afterward, it's like, I'm happy for Joe. Now he's back on the practice squad. Hey, listen. Indianapolis Colts.
Ooh.
Let's go.
Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh Steelers go get
Vikings.
Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
Minnesota Vikings, who scored 3 points yesterday in a win against the Raiders. Maybe you go pick up Joe Flacco.
Chargers now.
Los Angeles Chargers
Detroit
without Herbert
Lions.
since he's out.
Well,
no,
they're
they're not golf.
Okay, you're right.
Easy. Come on.
You're right.
That was low. I like it.
This is crazy.
They did the same thing last week, and it was confusing to me because I thought he looked really good against the Rams, and I was confused about that. I tweeted a few weeks ago that after the Browns beat the Steelers, that both these teams thinks there's no chance that either of them win in the playoffs, and that didn't matter. That was before Joe Flacco was
Legit.
on Browns.
Yeah.
This is the best Joe Flacco that's ever played, that's ever thrown a football.
Mike Florio last night on Sunday Night Football Countdown.
Yep.
He said that he talked to Joe Flacco, and Joe Flacco said on the phone call, Florio asked him, was there ever a time where you thought like no team's going to call? Like this is it? Because he's just been sitting around in great shape. He looks good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Looks great.
He looks properly jocked.
Stout.
In that and he's spinning it still. And Flacco said, at about the same time I got the call, I thought maybe I'm done. And then now all of a sudden, 3 weeks later, it's like, this guy might win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
This guy might be able to go on a run. Joe Flacco still got it. And now, these stats come out about the Pittsburgh Steelers since Ben retired. And that's going to be a tough pill to swallow over there in Pittsburgh.
No, it just shows how great 7 was. But
Certainly, but also how great Joe Flacco is, I guess, is what other people would say. Because every conversation about Joe Flacco going there was you just run the ball, hand the ball off, you'll get him in the right position, you'll check him into the right runs. It's like, nah, Joe Flacco's spinning it because that's what Joe Flacco does, amongst the other things. Letting him get to the point where he's vulnerable to potentially get signed somewhere else or plucked somewhere else doesn't make any sense for me from Cleveland, but a lot of people would say about the Cleveland Browns.
Well, the Cleveland Browns are the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah,
But I don't know, like the way that Shefty's tweet was worded, though, like, does Joe have to choose to leave the Browns if he wants to? And it sounds like they think he wouldn't do that. Like I have no idea. We'll have to ask Shefty exactly what it means. But
I mean, from what I've always known, like once you're on the practice squad, you're available to be plucked by any. What was it? JPP just got plucked a few weeks ago. So definitely odd. I'm sure it has something to do with the money and the transactions. Probably a question for Lombo or somebody who's been in that department. But very, very odd, especially after the back-to-back weeks.
What?
That, footsteps. He's been, Connor's been telling us about footsteps for a couple of years.
He has been. I don't know if that's his nickname. We'll have Schefter on in 10 minutes. We'll ask him more about that. Can't wait for it.
Speaking of it being crazy how the NFL work, Shefty, you dropped a post on X earlier about Joe Flacco reverting back to the practice squad, obviously coming off a 300-yard performance, 3 TDs. Why is that happening? Is it something they have in front office-wise with money? Like, educate us on that.
Yeah, well, a few people have actually texted me since you asked about that question. And basically, these are the rules, Darius. Basically, when you are promoted from the practice squad to the active roster, you revert back to the practice squad that Monday. Now, the Browns could have signed Joe Flacco on a full-time basis to their active roster last week. They didn't do that. So just by rule this morning, Flacco reverts back. Now, what's funny about that is that this guy has been something of a savior in Cleveland the last couple of weeks. And he's lit it up, and he's got this team on a path to where they're going to make the playoffs. And he's looked like, if you'll allow me, elite Joe Flacco.
There we go. Hey.
The boy Chef D.
Throwing long touchdown passes. He's looked elite. And so he now, as of this morning, even though he was named their starter for the rest of the year, is on their practice squad this morning until they make it a full-time contract, which they haven't yet done. Now, what's interesting is if you're a team that has a quarterback question this morning, and we could think of a few of them, there's one. How about the Chargers? How about the Giants? How about the Jets? How about, like, we could go on and on. They're
Jets don't have a problem.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Jets do not have a
They
problem.
figured it out.
They
got a sweet boy
They got a
slinging.
good, sweet boy.
Yeah.
You just need to not play him in the first half. That might have been the issue
Yeah.
this
there are
entire
a lot of
time.
teams.
Closer.
There are multiple teams that have a quarterback question. If they wanted this morning, they could call Joe Flacco or Joe Flacco's agent and say, hey, we want to sign you
Go get him.
onto our active roster, and we'll give you whatever money we're going to give you, and we could sign him. Now, the issue is, I think there have been some calls that have been made. Joe Flacco wants to stay in Cleveland.
Okay, so
he's-
he can't. Because our understanding of the practice squad just years ago when we were in the league, like any team could just pluck anybody off the practice squad. That is not the case with veterans or vested players.
No. Pat, when you're on a practice squad, you're essentially a free agent. You're on that practice squad, but if another team wants to sign you as their punter and you want to go to that team, you can then do that. So Joe
You can
Flacco,
say no though too. I didn't know that was the case.
Yeah, you can say no, of course. Yeah,
Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Because I
Come
didn't
on,
know
Joe.
that. Because there was a time where if you got plucked from somebody else's practice squad, they had to activate you. I think for 4 weeks. I think or 4 or 3 weeks.
Right, but the point is, whether you're Joe Flacco or another practice squad player, you're agreeing to leave. Once you get signed to the other team's active roster, I don't know whether it's 3 or 4 weeks, you're obligated to be on that roster for X number of games.
Yeah, active roster, which is obviously a much bigger check than the practice squad.
Correct.
Check. And the season.
But by the way,
go ahead.
any of these teams that have a quarterback question or a need, if they wanted, there's nothing to stop them from saying to Joe Flacco this morning, hey, Joe, we'll pay you $1 million a game for the last 4 games, and we want you to come in and be the starter. Like, they could do that if they want.
And then Joe takes that immediately to the Browns and says, they're saying $1 million.
Sorry.
You guys paid $230 million guaranteed to a guy. We're watching film.
We give
You
it
know
2.
what I mean? I just need 125. Good. Hey, Joe, good for you, Joe.
Go get it,
Joe.
Good for you, Joe.